I said, I'm Linda Nelson, and I had a fairly normal childhood. It was a time when dads were the breadwinners of the family and mothers were usually stay-at-home mothers, and they did most of the childhood care. That's the way my family was. My dad went to work at 7 in the morning. He worked for Great Northern Railroad and came home at 5 in the afternoon, and he was pretty well beat by then. And so mostly what he wanted was for us kids to be quiet. There was my older sister who was 4 years older than myself, and we would hunker around the radio in the evening and listen to whatever happened to be on the radio, whatever happened to be coming in. Married I suppose you could call him my high school sweetheart. He was out of school, and anyway, we went together for a couple of years and got engaged and got married, and about 18 months later started having a family. And as a stay-at-home mom, I didn't find that terribly rewarding. I helped on the farm. It was mostly my job was bringing the meals to the field, helping move machinery, but they sure wouldn't ever let me drive machinery. I mean, that was just an unheard of thing. We built a house in the country, and I kind of missed looking out the window and seeing other adults going by. It was kind of, in a way, kind of a lonely time. And somewhere along the line, I read an article about something called Women Involved in Farm Economics. And these were a group of women, farm wives, who were going to drive trucks to Lewiston, Idaho to protest low grain prices and high grain rates, transportation rates. And I thought, by golly, these are my kind of women. Women should be more active in the farm. So I got busy along with a couple other women, and we kind of got a little bit more active, and we started a group of wife members, and we went off to Great Falls in our car, and we're part of a agriculture parade. It was a great time in my life. I went into that being the president of the local chapter, and then was the area spokesman for several counties. And I did some things with an agricultural assistance program through the state, and I went out and I helped farmers. Farmers were going through a tough time at that time, and I went out and I was a peer counselor for them. When they called a hotline, I could go visit them. They didn't have to know my name or anything like that when they called, and I could talk to them on the phone, or I could go out and visit them and kind of help them get their lives together. And I also answered a hotline that was a suicide hotline, and did that probably once a month during the nighttime hours. I found it heartbreaking to go and help those farmers. I remember one of the cases that I went, and can't remember exactly what I did when I got there, but they wanted me to stay for dinner. And so I did, and their dinner was all commodity things that they could get through welfare. I mean, it was, Jell-O and cheese, and I can't remember what all, but they were very happy to have me there sharing that, and it was heartbreaking. And different ones that would call me, I mean, they were proud people. They didn't want to ask for help, but I had access to some commodities and so on, and I could even arrange like to go to Wolf Point and have some flour and some sugar, some basic things in the back seat of my car, and let them know where that would be while I was giving a talk somewhere, and they could go get it. My kids were in school. They were in lower grade school then. It was just the two little girls, and I had been watching the school board for some time and thinking, they really need women on this school board. But I knew that wasn't probably going to happen. So I asked Roger, who do you think I could ask? What man do you think I could ask that thinks like I do? And he said, why don't you do it yourself? There just were certain things that I found that men mostly talked about: school buses, mechanical things, how the janitors were doing, that sort of thing. I was more interested in what was happening in the classroom and what things they should be doing for the kids and things like that. I mostly for that just talked to people as I saw them. I said, I'm running for the school board and I'd appreciate your vote. They had gotten to kind of know me because once in a while, if I really didn't like something that was going on in the community, I would write a letter to the editor. So They were beginning to know that I was a person that would speak up. When I was elected, nobody was more surprised than I was to get the phone call the next morning. One man that was on the school board called and said, "Congratulations." Nobody else did. And when I showed up for the meeting, mostly they did not talk to me at all. Superintendent didn't say a word. But they learned that I really didn't have an agenda. I just wanted good things for the kids. And it went very well. I enjoyed that time on the school board. I was on it for about 8 years and ended up being the chairman of the board and really found it to be a very satisfying time. Youngest son was going to graduate from high school. And then I got to thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I just can't be sitting here on the farm. Both parties, for some reason, I guess, had seen enough that they thought I should be their candidate for the legislature. The current senator was retiring. The current House member was moving into the senator's spot. So I was asked to run as a candidate for both the Republicans and the Democratic Party. I really hadn't paid that much attention to politics, wasn't real sure about what party I was going to go with. Got out the encyclopedias and kind of looked, couldn't really tell what the difference was. So I got a yellow legal pad and drew a line down the middle, looked who was Democrat that I knew and who I knew that was Republican, and kind of decided that I would fit best with the Democrat Party, just going by those people. And the way I campaigned then, because I didn't have a lot of money, things were tough in the farm sector and I hadn't had a job or anything like that. So the way I really ran was by shoe leather. I did the doors, but I got with it and really knocked on the doors. And nobody had really knocked on the doors till that time. And so people would say, "I saw you were at my house, but I wasn't home, but I saw you were there," and they really liked that. And another thing I did to raise money is when I was first running, I would have something like a chili supper or something like that, and I would put an ad in the paper that said, it was a campaign, it was a fundraiser sort of thing. And then I would get friends that would help me with it, and then they'd make the chili and stuff like that, and people would come and they would sit and have chili, and I would talk to them and so on. It was very heartwarming. A lot of people would help in different ways, like the water wasn't so great there, and Tim Hutzler would donate bottled water for the thing, different things like that. And I found that the men give the money. Women at that time really didn't. Women weren't involved in politics, and they just weren't into peeling out and giving money. Some of them were, but if they did, it was much less. Men give much larger donations, and men give more to men than to women. One fellow who I knew supported me as a Democrat turned around, he gave me $50, and he turned around and gave my opponent $100 because my opponent was a neighbor. And so he thought that he had to be a good guy and give him a donation and give him a healthy donation, where I just got the $50. Well, his son found out about that, and his son went and told his dad he had to ante up another $50 to me. And I had, the person who was at the door taking money, somebody who was a little bit forceful and managed to squeeze a few extra dollars out of them. My neighbor lady, Mary Nielsen, was very helpful. She was wonderful with a camera, so she would go around with me and take pictures, and so that cut down on my costs of my brochures. I had a nice brochure. I always had nice brochures that hit the things that I wanted to hit, like agriculture and women's issues. It has become much more costly to run for office now, and it's a hard thing to do. But I'm hoping that women now have evolved so that they support other women, and being a lot more women work now, they've got their own money to give, and I hope they do that. I didn't have a campaign staff. The best person that I had was Leora Johansson, and she was one that asked me to run in the first place. She and Butch Michaels were really helpers that way. Leora was a great, great help. There was nothing she wouldn't do for me. She did doors for me, with me. She donated. She was wonderful. I called Leora my other mother because she really was a tremendous help. Had a staff person for the state. His name was Russ Brown, and he was a very good person to tell me what to do as a campaign person. And he pushed hard. And I didn't do everything that he told me to do. He said you needed to go to the doors several times, and I didn't believe that for a minute because I thought people don't want you pestering at their door all the time. I thought once was enough. And you know, when I went around and I put my thing in the door and it said, "I'm sorry I missed you," and the people saw I was there, I thought that was really a great way of doing it, because my opponent would go door to door, and he knew that a lot of these people worked, and if he went door to door, it would have to be like 5 o'clock at night. Well, mothers had got home and they were trying to make supper, and it was cold out and it was getting dark out. I don't think they wanted to stand there and hold the door open to a campaign person, somebody, a politician running for something. And they sure didn't want to invite them in the house, or they'd be afraid they'd never get them out again. So, you know, I wouldn't vote for somebody just because they're a woman, and would not advocate for that, but the best person for the office, whether it's a man or a woman. And there's certainly some good women out there. The guy that I ran against didn't think he would have really any trouble at all. And I think I won by something like 400 votes, something like that. But after the election, I was in a restaurant one day, and he came in and he sat down, and he saw that I was there, and he got up and he walked out again. I didn't see much of him for several years. And then one year, several years later, I was going to an auction sale, and there he was, and he walked in with me and he said, you know, he said, I couldn't believe it when you won. I couldn't believe that I lost. And that is why he hadn't been able to face me. It was demeaning for him to lose to a woman. Anyway, he got over that, and we became friends. Yeah. Politics brings out nasty things in people, and that's no wonder people don't want to run. Between that and the money it takes and things like that, got to admire those that stick their neck out and go for it. Once I got elected, it was rather scary because it was moving to Helena, which was 500 miles away, and it meant finding a place to live out there, and it was going to be a big experience. So I rented a house from somebody who had a husband that was in the Congress, and the husband had died, and they had an apartment. So I moved out there, and of course that was first part of January. It had been very cold weather and so on, and I moved all my stuff in, turned up the heat, and all of a sudden I heard a roar, and here a pipe had broken out, and the water was gushing out of the wall. And the woman that I rented from was in Washington, D.C. Oh my gosh. I had to open the front door and be shoveling water out with a shovel. I went into the legislature to represent the people of Northeast Montana and vote the way they would want me to vote for things that were good for them, and so on. So they gave me the bill to carry the Ag Assistance Program. The governor didn't like the bill, but I did carry that, and it was successful. It passed, and that was a feather in my cap for winning from a Republican in a Republican area. Immediately that first session, I was named the vice chair of the Transportation Committee. The next time around, then I did run for the Senate and was elected to the Senate. And I liked the Senate much, much better. One of my fellow women in the Senate said something about the Senate being like a tea party in comparison to the House, that was more like a beer brawl or something like that. And it really was. The senators are well, at least at that time, were more respectable, were more respecting of each other, the opposite parties. One of the bills, or one of the committees that I was really glad to be on, was the Appropriations Committee. In the House, it was appropriations. In the Senate, it was finance and claims. And not very many women got to be on that. I guess they thought that men were better with figures and things like that. But I had a good friend, Dorothy Cody from Wolf Point, who was on that committee. And when she went off it, then I used the fact that they needed a woman on there, and they needed somebody from Northeast Montana. And I did have, I had a lot of credibility because I took out a Republican when I was running for the legislature, and that was a real feather in my cap. So I got on the finance committee. One of the things that I'm very proud that I was able to do, some of the people were going to cut out driver's license stations. They were trying to cut them down so that there wasn't spending so much money. So they were taking the one out in my area in Sheridan County and going to make us drive about 100 miles to get a driver's license. And I mean, that was just ridiculous, but they were going to do it. So I was able to, through House Bill 2, to go into the committee and make my case to save this driver's license station. And it worked, and I was able to save the driver's license stations for Sheridan County and the other small committees or communities in the state. And that really reassured my election the next time around. I was very successful with the bills I carried, and the reason it was because I could get along with the other side of the aisle very well. In fact, I came from a area that was quite conservative, and I had to recognize that too. I was elected the whip in the Senate for the Democrats, and no woman had done that before. I was dean of the Senate the last time I was there. I just have a lot of firsts that I've done, and I feel like I got up to that glass ceiling. Maybe didn't break the glass ceiling, but I think I helped women along with that, and I think that does make me very proud, because it was a time that was rather difficult to do those things for a woman. And I am pleased with my life. I'm pleased with the respect that I had, and I know the person that went into the House after I did, she said everybody around Helena knew me and, liked me. You got to get yourself out there. I mean, you can't just all of a sudden run for office when you have no name recognition. You've got to get out and go to some organizations, take a stand on some things, meet people. Can't be too shy about it. Start selling yourself before you do that. But I sure would encourage women to do this. Women have so much to offer, and they come at it from a different perspective. And you can't expect the men to support you on these things. And I just love to see at least 50% of elected people being women, because they have a right to be heard. And it doesn't mean that we walk in lockstep together, because we don't. Dare to risk. Stick your neck out there. If you want to do it, try it.